Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about something that messes with your head and pulls at your heart when the man who loves you the most is the same man who seems to ignore you the most. Sounds contradictory, doesn't it? It feels like emotional whiplash. One moment he's showing up with quiet strength, doing everything to support your dreams, and the next he's distant, silent, almost invisible. And your mind starts to spin with questions. Did I do something wrong? Has he stopped loving me? Is he losing interest? But here's what we never talk about. Some men, especially those who love hard, love silently. Not because they don't care, but because they're carrying battles you don't see, trying to become a man worthy of the love they feel. They retreat, not to abandon you, but to protect you from the mess they're sorting through internally. Their silence isn't rejection, it's reflection. And sometimes that reflection is how they show love, because they're not just loving you, they're building themselves to lead, to provide, to be enough. This speech is not just about romantic confusion, it's about understanding emotional strength, recognizing the power in quiet love, and transforming the way we see personal connection, growth, and success. True love isn't always loud, it's often quiet and intentional. We live in a world that glorifies grand gestures, constant communication, and visible affection as the ultimate proof of love. We're trained to equate texts, calls, flowers, and Instagram posts with care. And when those things slow down or disappear, it's easy to panic. But real love, deep love, the kind of love that changes you, it doesn't always show up in the ways you expect. Sometimes it shows up in silence, in stillness, in sacrifice, in consistency that doesn't beg for recognition. A man who truly loves may not always be vocal, but he's always intentional. His love is in the way he listens more than he speaks. It's in the way he remembers the little things you said 6 months ago and works quietly in the background to make them real. His love is in the way he holds back his fears because he doesn't want to burden you. It's in the way he shows up not with flowers but with presence, with protection, with loyalty. These things aren't always Instagrammable, but they're real. And in their quiet, they hold power. Society often teaches men to measure their worth by how much they provide, not how much they feel. So a man who loves deeply might not always know how to articulate it. He's being taught to be the provider, the problem solver, the protector, not the poet. So instead of flooding your phone with sweet nothings, he's out there grinding, building a future hopes includes you. While you're wondering why he hasn't texted, he's worrying about whether he's doing enough to deserve your belief in him. That's not neglect, that's pressure. The pressure to be enough, to not let you down, to carry the weight of his love for you in a way that proves itself through action. This doesn't mean you have to settle for emotional starvation. Communication matters. Your needs matter, but understanding the way someone loves is part of growing into love that lasts. Not every man who goes quiet is giving up on you. Some are just working through their own noise, trying to make sure they don't fail you. They love with intention, even when their execution is flawed, and often they love you so much they're scared of messing it up, so they freeze. Not out of disinterest, but out of deep respect for what you mean to them. Loud love is easy to spot, easy to post, to sell. Quiet love takes emotional maturity to recognize. But when you see it, when you really understand it, you start to realize that some of the most powerful forms of love live in the unnoticed details. The check-ins masked as casual text, the way he pays attention to what drains you and tries to shield you from it. The unspoken promise in the way he stays even when he's silent. That's not absence. That's depth. When someone we love pulls away, goes silent, or creates emotional distance, our instincts scream one thing: they don't care anymore. We internalize the space, we take it personally, we start rewinding every conversation, rereading messages, trying to locate the exact moment the shift happened. But what if the silence has nothing to do with you? What if it's not rejection but reflection? What if emotional distance isn't a sign of lost love but a sign of inner conflict? Men in particular are often conditioned to suppress emotions, mask vulnerability, and be strong at all costs. Society tells them to be providers, to stay focused, to not show weakness. So when they feel something intense, love, stress, fear, inadequacy, it doesn't always come out in words. It comes out in withdrawal, in stillness, in detachment, not because they don't care, but because they're overwhelmed and unsure of how to process the emotional chaos happening inside them. And sometimes that emotional chaos is caused by how much they care. Think about it. When a man is truly invested in a relationship, when he sees you not as a temporary part of his life, but as a future, his mind goes into overdrive. He starts thinking about what he needs to become, what he needs to build, what he has to fix in himself to be worthy of the connection. If he's dealing with unresolved trauma, financial pressure, force of failure, that pressure multiplies. And instead of expressing it, he shuts down, not to push you away, but to protect you from his internal mess. This isn't about excusing poor communication or emotionally unavailable behavior. It's about understanding that not all emotional distance is a red flag. Sometimes it's a man's way of regrouping. recentering, processing emotions in the only way he knows how, silently. And while it might feel like abandonment, it's often a sign that he's confronting his demons, not escaping from the relationship. He's not ghosting you, he's ghost hunting inside himself. We often expect love to look like constant closeness. We think if he really loved me, he'd talk to me about everything. But not everyone has that emotional vocabulary. Some people were never taught how to name their feelings, let alone share them. So the love shows up in absence, in retreat, in quiet moments where they're wrestling with the weight of what it means to truly care for someone. It's messy, it's confusing, but it's real. Emotional distance can also be a mirror. It reflects back the parts of themselves they're not proud of. If a man feels inadequate, lost, or ashamed, being near someone he deeply admires can make those feelings louder. He sees your strength, your light, your drive, and instead of leaning into it, he pulls away because he doesn't feel like he matches your energy. And rather than risk disappointing you, he distances himself, not out of lack of care, but because he cares too much. Women often absorb this distance as rejection. They think he's not calling because he doesn't want me. But in many cases, he's not calling because he doesn't feel like he deserves you right now. That's not your burden to fix, that's his internal war, but understanding it gives you power. It helps you separate your worth from his behavior. It helps you stay grounded in the truth that love isn't always loud or linear. Sometimes quiet is complicated. It's full of inner battles that have nothing to do with you, with him, everything to do with him trying to become the man he believes you deserve. It's important to honor your needs and your emotional boundaries. You deserve communication. You deserve consistency. But it's equally important to not rush to conclusions that tear down something real. Emotional distance doesn't always mean love has left the building. Sometimes it means love is being restructured, reorganized, ground in the background. This space can be a turning point. It can either become the moment you give up or the moment you dig deeper, not into chasing, but into understanding. Understanding that love isn't always about how often you hear I love you. Sometimes it's about how someone is fighting behind the scenes to feel worthy enough to say it and mean it. That distance might feel cold, but behind it could be a man who is burning with the desire to be enough, who loves you so much he's terrified of letting you down, who's retreating not because he's done, but because he's afraid he's not ready. It's not always about absence, it's about internal alignment, about creating space to rebuild himself so when he comes back whole, not hiding. So don't always take emotional distance at face value. Look deeper, listen to the silence, and ask yourself not just what's missing, but what might be transforming. Because sometimes the man who's pulling away is the one fighting the hardest to become someone who can stay. There's this myth floating around that love is only love when it's romanticized, when it looks like poetic text messages, surprise dates, soft smiles, and deep conversations at 2 a.m. And sure, those moments are beautiful. They make your heart race and your soul glow. But real men, the ones rooted in purpose, in growth, in legacy, they often express love in a very different language, not just through affection, but through responsibility. For a real man, love isn't just about how he feels, it's about what he does. It's not just I love you, it's I've got you. It's not just hugs and kisses, it's making sure you have what you need, even if it costs him sleep, comfort, or pride. Affection might bring you butterflies, but responsibility, that brings you safety. And a man who takes responsibility for his love is a man who understands the weight of what it means to truly show up, not just when it's easy, but when it's hard, boring, inconvenient, or uncomfortable. A real man views love as something he must carry, not just feel. That's why sometimes he gets quiet, why he doesn't always know how to express everything through words or gestures, because he's processing your love not like a story to be told, but a mission to be fulfilled. He's calculating, planning, building, not because he's distant, but because he feels deeply accountable to be someone you can lean on, not just emotionally, but practically. This is the kind of love that isn't always sexy on the surface. It's the love that fixes things before they break, the love that checks your tires before a long drive, that watches you sleep just to make sure you're breathing okay because you sounded off earlier that day. It's the kind of love that makes hard decisions, even unpopular ones, because his priority is your well-being. He processes love through action, often quiet, sometimes unnoticed, but always consistent. Sometimes that level of responsibility weighs heavy, especially for a man who wasn't taught how to balance emotional expression with leadership. He might feel like his only value is in what he can provide, not who he is. So he pours his energy into making sure you're taken care of, and in the process forgets to say the words. Not because they don't live in his heart, but because he's already showing them in the way he wakes up earlier, works harder, and stretches himself to be better For you, this kind of man might not send long love letters, but he'll remember to pay the bills on time because he knows financial stress makes you anxious. He might not post your selfies, but he'll be up at midnight researching how to support your business idea. He may not always say, I'm proud of you, but he'll brag about you when you're not around. And sometimes you'll wonder if he even feels the same intensity you do until you look closely and realize he's building his life around you. Even before trying to feel like you want to win, he has the energy to build and protest, and he's the energy to build quietly, steadily, with discipline and intent. Responsibility-based love isn't about being stoic or emotionally unavailable. It's about love being rooted in doing more than saying. It's about protecting, providing, planning. It's about being the man who makes sure the foundation is strong, not just the wallpaper pretty. And yes, there's room for softness too. Every man needs to learn the balance. But don't miss the message, because it's not wrapped in a romantic bow. For someone saying I love you is vulnerable, but taking responsibility for your life together, that's sacred. And that's how they process emotion. That's how they channel their feelings. Love becomes action. And while it might not feed your romantic cravings every single moment, it builds something far more valuable: trust. You begin to realize that while sweet words can warm you, steady responsibility anchors you. That affection might be the spark, but responsibility is the firewood. That a man who sees love as his mission will never let you go cold, even if he forgets to tell you how warm you make him feel. This doesn't mean affection doesn't matter. It absolutely does. It's okay to want both, to be held and helped, to be adored and supported. But understanding that some men express love through responsibility allows you to receive what's already there, instead of waiting for a different expression of it. It gives you clarity, it gives you peace. And most of all, it frees you from constantly questioning the heart of someone who's already showing you where it lives, through what he's willing to carry. So next time he seems too quiet, too focused, too distracted, look beyond the absence of words. Look at the life he's trying to build. Look at the way he takes ownership of your safety, your happiness, your peace. That's not detachment, that's devotion. And that's the kind of love that doesn't just feel good in the moment, but lasts through every season. In a world that celebrates closeness, instant replies, and constant availability, we've come to believe that love must always look like togetherness, like showing up 24/7, like being physically or emotionally present every second of the day. But real love, deep, transformational, enduring love, doesn't always work that way. Sometimes love needs air. Sometimes self-growth and love requires space, not because the bond is weak, but because the individuals in that bond are growing into something stronger. We often forget that people are not finished products. We're all evolving, all unlearning old patterns, chasing purpose and becoming who we're meant to be. In that process, it doesn't always happen hand in hand. Sometimes it happens in solitude. Sometimes love demands that we step back, not to run away, but to reflect, reset, and realign. The man who truly loves you may not always be physically close, but if he's committed to growing into the version of himself who can sustain your love, then stepping back is not abandonment, it's evolution. Growth is messy, it's quiet, it often happens behind the scenes. A man who is serious about becoming better for himself and for you will face internal battles that are impossible to fight while being emotionally entangled every moment. He may need to isolate himself to understand what's been holding him back, what fears are driving his actions, and what patterns he needs to break. That space, it's not a sign that love is fading. It's a sign that something deeper is forming. There's a difference between taking space and creating distance to escape. A man who is using space for self-growth still cares, he checks in, he shows respect, but he knows that unless he figures out his own path, his presence in the relationship will eventually become a burden rather than a blessing. That's self-awareness, that's maturity, and it's rare but powerful. It means he sees love not as a place to hide from growth, but as a reason to pursue it. If you want a man who leads with strength, who builds with intention, who loves with wisdom, you must also be prepared for the seasons where he's focused inward, where he's reconstructing his mindset, where he's breaking generational habits, rewiring beliefs, and defining what love means for him so he can give it with clarity and consistency. That kind of transformation doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen under the pressure of constant emotional closeness. It requires space, it requires solitude, it requires silence. Now, That doesn't mean you put your own needs on pause. That doesn't mean you accept emotional negligence or wait indefinitely for someone who's not communicating their journey. But when space is intentional, explained, and grounded in personal growth, it's not something to fear. It's something to respect, because not everyone is brave enough to say, I need time to grow into the person you deserve. Not everyone is willing to risk comfort for the sake of becoming better. We often mistake presence for progress, but being physically there doesn't always mean someone is emotionally engaged, and being emotionally engaged doesn't always require physical presence. When a man steps back to elevate himself, when he's taking time to fix his foundation, that's love in action. That's him saying, you matter enough to me that I don't want to bring you into the chaos I haven't yet cleaned up. It's not distance, it's discipline. Relationships aren't just about being together, they're about becoming together. And becoming requires seasons of discomfort, of uncertainty, and yes, of space. A relationship built on truth will survive those seasons. It will allow room for both people to expand, evolve, and come back with more to give. But that only happens when space is honored, not resented. If he's growing and you're growing, then the connection isn't shrinking, it's stretching. It's making room for more love, more capacity, more understanding. It's preparing you both for the future you say you want. And yes, there will be days when it feels lonely. Days when the silence is louder than any argument. Days when you wonder if the space has turned into separation. But if the foundation is strong and if the intention behind the space is rooted in growth, you'll see that this is not the end. It's the middle, the part where individuals become whole, so the love can be whole too. Love that lasts is not built in constant closeness. It's built in trust. Trust that even in silence, the heart is loyal. Trust that even in distance, the vision is shared. Trust that when the space is over, you'll meet again, not as the same people, but as better ones. That's what self-growth does. That's what real love requires. Let me know when you're ready for the next keynote. When someone you love starts ignoring you, when the texts slow down, the calls fade, the energy shifts, it can feel like rejection, like abandonment, like they're slowly erasing your presence from their world. The silence is sharp, it stings. It makes you question everything. Did I do something wrong? Is he falling out of love? Am I not enough? But here's what most people don't realize. Ignoring doesn't always mean he's losing interest. Sometimes ignoring is a shield, a coping mechanism, a defense response to emotional overload. There are moments in life when emotions become too heavy to carry and too complex to explain. For a man who hasn't been taught how to properly express, regulate, or even name his emotions, the only available option may be withdrawal. Ignoring becomes a way to temporarily escape the pressure, not because he wants to hurt you, but because he doesn't know how to process what he's feeling without causing damage in the process. It's a form of self-protection, and sometimes it's also protection for you. Emotional overload isn't always obvious. It can be triggered by financial stress, fear of failure, deep insecurity, or internal conflicts about identity, purpose, and direction. For a man who loves deeply but silently, these pressures don't just affect him, they affect how he shows up in the relationship. And when those pressures reach a breaking point, silence feels safer than saying the wrong thing. Distance feels more manageable than risking vulnerability. Ignoring, you might feel cruel, but for him, it's control. His way of holding together a world that feels like it's cracking. Many men were never given the emotional tools to handle depth. They were taught to push through, to bury their pain, to man up instead of opening up. So when love brings vulnerability, when connection brings pressure, when emotions run deep, the response isn't always connection, it's retreat. Not because the feelings aren't real, but because they're too real, too powerful, too intense. And he doesn't know how to sit with that without unraveling. So what does he do? He disconnects, he goes quiet, he avoids, he convinces himself that space will help, that silence will ease the noise. But what he doesn't realize is that in protecting his inner world, he's wounding the one person who just wants to understand it. And that's the heartbreaking part, because while he's trying to cope, you're left in confusion. And while he's fighting his own battles, you feel like collateral damage in a war you weren't even told about. This doesn't mean his behavior is justified. Ignoring someone you love without explanation is damaging. Communication is a cornerstone of healthy love. But understanding the why behind the silence gives you a new kind of clarity. It helps you move from confusion to compassion, from panic to perspective, from I'm being rejected to he's overwhelmed and he doesn't know how to talk about it yet. Now, let's be real. It's not your job to fix him. You can hold space, but you can't fill his silence with your own self-worth. You can offer understanding, but you can't rescue him from the emotional work he needs to do on his own. That's his journey, that's his healing. But if you can recognize that his ignoring isn't always absence, it's avoidance, it's overload, it's unspoken fear, you give yourself the power to stop internalizing what was never about you in the first place. And here's the truth, people often ignore not what they don't care about, but what they care too much about. He might be afraid that if he opens up, you'll see a side of him that's messy, insecure, or broken. He might worry that you'll look at him differently, that his emotional chaos will scare you off. So instead of risking that, he shuts down, not because he wants to lose you, but because he's terrified of what loving you is requiring him to face about himself. We don't talk enough about how love is a mirror. It reflects back everything we haven't healed. And for a man who's still running from his own pain, love can feel like exposure, like being emotionally naked in a room without armor. Ignoring you becomes his attempt to get dressed again, to regain control, to rebuild the walls he thinks he needs to survive. But what he doesn't realize is that by ignoring the one person who sees his heart, he's also ignoring the opportunity to grow, to heal, and to truly be known. So no, ignoring you doesn't always mean he stopped loving you. In many cases, it means the love is bigger than he knows how to handle. It's real, it's vulnerable, it's terrifying, and he hasn't yet built the emotional muscle to carry it. He's overwhelmed, not absent. He's overloaded, not indifferent. He's scared, not gone. Let me know when you're ready to move on to the next keynote, or if you want to close it out with a powerful ending for the whole speech.